Hello, my name is Morgan Spicer, and I am the Special Projects Coordinator for the ARC of the Mid-Ohio Valley, and welcome to another episode of Legislative Matters Now with M&M. Thank you so much for joining us, and we have a good show for you today. We're going to get started with our first segment, which is Who You Going to Call, but first, let's cover the purpose of the show. The purpose of the show is to educate you, the self-advocate, on various legislative matters that are important to you, as well as feature a self-advocate who is using their self-advocacy skills to not only benefit themselves, but others around them at home or in their communities. Normally, I would be joined by my co-host, Melissa Southall, who is the self-advocate coordinator for the ARC of the Mid-Ohio Valley and People First, but she is unable to join us today, so it'll be just me leading the charge. On today's show, we have an expert on legislature who has experience with how bills pass and how bills don't pass, and will provide that important information to you. For our Advocate in Action segment, we have a lady who will be speaking to us about why self-advocacy is so important to her, as well as some encouragement for self-advocates. But first things first, let's get the show underway with our first segment, Who You Going to Call?
All right, it's time to play Who You Going to Call. And today, as we do, we have our question. Your question, you want to find out more about legislative topics and are not sure who to call to get more information. So, do you call your city council member, because this is state legislation, your state legislators, including your state House of Delegates members or state senators, your U.S. senators or U.S. Congress members, or another person who is an expert in the field? Morgan, what do you say?
I would go for D.
Okay, another person who is an expert in the field.
Yes.
That is the correct answer. An expert who knows the insides and outs of the legislature would be the best candidate to help you find out more information about a certain bill or if a bill has been passed or not. You can also get that information by going to the website of the West Virginia Legislature. So very good, Morgan. So then who is our guest for today?
And our special guest today is McDaniel, and we'll be bringing her on in just a moment. But that was easy, right? But this brings up an ever important rule when speaking or writing to your legislators. And that rule is to know who you want to talk to, as well as the topic you want to present to them. Information is key. And if a senator or delegate doesn't understand the bill you are presenting, help them understand so they can learn the ins and outs of the bill, as well as why it is so important to you. And hopefully, in return, you gain a valuable ally to help fight for the legislation that is important to you and speak on your behalf when bringing that bill to the Senate. Today's guest will be talking about a legislative bill that has been passed and a legislative bill that did not pass, as well as answer some questions. It's important for you, the self-advocate, to learn about this, and we can't wait to bring our first guest who will cover this topic. Our guest today is McDaniel from the West Virginia Statewide Independent Living Council. Thank you so much, Ann, for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Morgan. I'm happy to be here.
We're glad to have you. So I will go ahead and start with our first question here. Now, do you have to go to the Capitol to advocate?
No, you do not. Particularly these days, because so much information is available electronically, it's not as important that you have to be there every day. And obviously, during this pandemic, we weren't even allowed to be there unless we were invited. You had to get an invitation to be allowed to go to the Capitol. So I realize that not everybody lives close by, and going to the Capitol can be a really difficult trek if you live in a distant part of the state, especially during the session that always happens in the wintertime, right? So I want to make sure that everybody really understands that you don't have to be there. You can still talk to legislators and legislative staffers and your allies on the bills that you care about and the issues that you care about, whether you're there in person or not. And finding ways to do that is really important. The fact that the legislative website has become so valuable is really important in being able to do your advocacy without having to be at the Capitol. And your advocacy really can make a difference at the legislature. Legislators need to know how you think and how a specific bill or even a part of a bill can really change your life in a good way or a bad way. Why it's important to you. What difference is it going to make? So you want to make sure that you find good ways to talk to legislators. And it doesn't always have to be during the legislative session.
Okay, that was awesome. So what legislators should you talk to?
Well, that depends. I've learned over the years that many questions, the answer is it depends. Obviously, you want to talk to your own legislators that live in your area that know you. And if they don't know you, you need to get to know them so that when you have issues, you can talk to them. But you don't just talk to those folks because they may or may not be able to make a difference on your issue. All the bills that are introduced at the legislature get assigned to a committee. And the committee chairperson is the one who decides what to put on the agenda for that committee. So you want to make sure you talk to them. If you can talk to their staff, sometimes that's even better. But you want to make sure they know why this issue is important, what this bill will do, how it will change your life, and urge them to put the bill on the agenda. You also probably need to talk to other folks in leadership. The majority leader in each house, the House and the Senate, has a whole lot to do with what bills run and what bills don't run. And that person has a lot of power. You want to get to know them. You want them to understand your issues and why they're important to you. So that's somebody you want to reach out to as well. And then other folks on the committee and in the legislature have different levels of power. So you need to start paying attention to who seems to have influence and who your potential allies might be. Get legislators that care about your issues. Most legislators have somebody in their family that has a disability. Some people have children that their own children have disabilities, or their brother or sister, or their parents. So you've got to learn more about them and find those individuals who are going to be supportive, but then also the people who have the ability to give more attention to whether a bill is going to run or not run, whether it's going to be taken up in committee or not. And that, there's a chairperson, but there's also a minority leader and a majority leader on the committees. You want to talk to those folks. It requires you getting to know more about the legislators, but it's worth it because those kind of connections can make a big difference. And getting to know the staff people can sometimes be at least as important, if not more important.
Yes, it's something I covered just a few minutes ago about that. It's important to have all that information so when you do present that, you've got a potential ally because you're educating them about that bill if they're unsure about it. So absolutely.
And so your own legislators from your part of the state can help you figure out who those people are.
Perfect. So when should you talk to them? When is a good time to do that?
Well, obviously during the legislative session, if it's a bill that's running or potentially running and you want to make that happen. But that's also the busiest time for legislators is during the session. So you want to get to know them when they're at home. If they're your local legislators, you want to set times to talk to them, whether you talk in person or not. But you also can reach other legislators more easily when they're at home than you can during the week. During the legislative session, that's when they're most busy. There's also legislative interim meetings that happen roughly monthly in between the real legislative sessions, and they have joint committee meetings. So more of the folks are at the Capitol during that time and might be more accessible than they are during the regular session. So you need to be reaching out pretty much all year and finding out which times are going to work best, depending on which legislators you want to talk to. During the year when the session's not on, legislators are always present at community activities and events because they want to be seen. and you can run into them at those events and talk to them too.
A lot of opportunities there to get to know them. Yes. Now, how should you talk to them?
You're talking about what methods, like whether
Yeah.
you're in person or not, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, in person is always preferable because you can make a more personal connection, but it's not always possible, especially if it's the session and you don't live close to Charleston, especially if you want to talk to a legislator who's from a different part of the state. But everybody has gotten a lot more savvy about how to do that during the pandemic and as more electronic options have become available. So you can find all of their contact information on the legislative website. So that's one way to figure out a good way to talk to them. You're going to find home phone numbers as well as state capitol phone numbers. Many of them put their email addresses on the legislative website. Some during the session, emails usually aren't good because they get so many they don't read them. If you're a Facebook person, Facebook is a great way to connect with legislators. Most of them are on there. Friend them, and then you'll see what they're talking about. And they'll see what you're talking about. If you post things, they'll see it if they're your friend and you're their friend. But you can also use that messaging app that's on Facebook to instant message people. And they have that on their phone. So you can reach them quickly if you want to do that. I have a colleague who is an expert at doing that and has lots of relationships with legislators just because she friended them and she messages them through Facebook. So that's always a good thing to do. Obviously, you can call them and talk to them on the telephone, but because of the electronic options that are available, I really suggest that you do Facebook or Zoom or Skype or one of those not Facebook, FaceTime, or one of those kinds of applications where you could see each other.
Mhm.
And they really like that too. And they've gotten really used to doing that during the pandemic, this past legislative session, when people weren't really at the Capitol. People still scheduled meetings and we still met with legislators and we used FaceTime or Zoom so that they could see us and we could see them, and more than one person could be talking with them at a time. And that is really, really helpful. And the legislators really like doing that.
Okay. Now, how do you know what's happening with a bill? Now, I know earlier I mentioned that you were going to bring up an example of a bill that passed and a bill that did not pass.
Do you want me to talk about those now?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you please?
I will. I'm going to turn my paper over so I don't get the bill numbers wrong. There was a really good bill, which was House Bill 2290, and it was titled Initiating a State Employment First Policy to Facilitate Integrated Employment of Disabled Persons. Now, bill titles can sometimes tell you all you need to know about a bill, and sometimes they tell you absolutely nothing. This one's a pretty good bill title. And some of you have probably heard of Employment First. And this was a bill that we worked on for about 3 years before we got it to pass. And it did pass this session. We got legislators interested in it. We talked to legislators about any concerns that they might have about it. Changes were made to the bill and tweaked over the last couple of years to make it easier to get the bill through. We had champions, legislators who really bought into it, thought it was a really good idea. Those legislators can help you keep track of what's going on with a bill. And you can help them keep track of what's going on with the bill. So you want to make sure you have those relationships. This bill is it sets up a task force. It is requiring the development of specific policies that promote employment first, that are going to be state policies. And it therefore encourages all the different state agencies that are involved in some way in helping people with disabilities get jobs to work together and to make employment first a priority, that people need real jobs in the community for real pay that is going to help more people with disabilities actually get work out in the community. You know, the unemployment rate is not all that high in our state, but for people with disabilities, it's very, very high. So we wanted to make sure that that was a priority. And because the groundwork was laid, the champions were identified, and the organizations that cared about it all worked together, the Fair Shake Network, the DD Council, the Statewide Independent Living Council, the Centers for Independent Living, the Division of Rehabilitation Services. We all work together, and that builds your strength and your power at the Capitol, and that bill passed.
Wow. Yeah, we actually did a broadcast a couple episodes ago, I believe, about the Employment First bill. I believe we talked with Steve Wiseman about that.
That's great. And
Yes.
Steve was one of those people that we managed to get invited to the Capitol so that he could be there when the committee hearings happened about that bill.
Now, did you have a bill that didn't pass?
We did. Senate Bill 73, and the title is Prohibiting Discrimination in Access to Organ Transplants Based on Physical or Mental Disability. And there was a lot of controversy around that bill, surprisingly. The whole point was to ensure that the whole organ transplant process was not discriminatory against people with disabilities. And some of the pieces of it are, like, there's provisions that you have to be able to conduct the self-care that's necessary once you go through the process of having an organ transplant. And it makes it sound like you have to be able to do that independently. And as we know, a lot of folks with disabilities have supports, whether it's individuals that can remind them to do things or help them make sure they do them correctly, or if it's individuals with physical disabilities that have to have somebody actually do things for them. And that was a way of discriminating against those folks with disabilities and preventing them to get an organ transplant. Well, this bill shows that you can have supports to help you do that, and that shouldn't be a reason for you to not get an organ transplant. But there's still some folks at the organ transplant centers that have concerns, and we weren't able to talk to them, and the legislators that were supportive weren't able to get everybody pulled together. So that bill did not pass this year. It didn't even run in committee, and the committee chairs wanted to run the bill. So they're going to help pull together conversations between now and next session and include those folks that have concerns, the medical community and the transplant centers, to make sure that those things get addressed or clarified in the bill so that it's going to be easier to get it passed next year.
Perfect. And that would be an excellent future episode to cover that bill and ways that we can get that passed. So thank you very much, Ann, for talking with us today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and you definitely gave us a lot of information today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much, Ann, for joining us on the show today. I definitely learned a lot about a couple of the legislative House and Senate bills, as well as what happens when a legislative bill passes and what happens when the legislative bill does not pass. We cannot stress how important these processes are for self-advocates to learn. We encourage all of you that if you have any legislative topics that you do not understand or need help with writing that all-important letter to your state senator or delegate, please reach out to us and let us know. We would be glad to help you with that letter or answer any questions you may have to help clarify a legislative topic you're having trouble understanding. And you can call us here at the ARC at 304-422-3151, or you can email me or Melissa personally, and my email address is morgan.spicer@thearcmov.org, and Melissa's is melissa.southall@peoplefirstwv.org. So our next segment is our Advocate in Action segment, and today we have Darla Ervin, who's going to talk about why self-advocacy is important to her, and we hope that she can encourage you, the self-advocate, to continue to speak up for yourself and speak up on the issues that are important to you. Thank you so much, Darla, for joining us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So let's go ahead and get started. So why don't you tell us first how advocacy has benefited you in your life?
The way it's benefited me is I've learned to say what I need, and I've learned how to go about getting the services or whatever it is that I need, or how to request something that doesn't exist, that may not exist.
Mm-hmm. All right, and what are some legislative matters that are important to you?
For me, it would be the waivers, or anything to do with the waivers, because that is one of the things that helps me be able to live in my own home, on my own, or with the caregivers, because for the things that I can't do.
And what would be some good advice for advocates who want to advocate for the issues that are important to them? What would be some encouragement for them?
The encouragement that I can give them is to find something that really matters to them, and it's okay to speak up for what you want, because if you don't speak up, then nobody's going to know what you want or what you need. So it's okay to speak up.
Okay, perfect. So I heard that you have been a part of some legislative action. Why don't you tell us about the Ken Ervin bill?
It's actually the Community Living Services and Supports Act.
Mm-hmm.
It was done in, like, I believe 2007 or 2008 after he died. But I forget what the original name was, but I think they changed it after he died. And it helps. One of the things that I think was in it was the ability to use or to be in the community if you had a ventilator. Because a lot of people didn't have that ability. If you were on a ventilator for a while, you could only be in a nursing facility due to that. And it, like, some of the other things that it dealt with was like feeding tubes and different.
With the bill, did you get everything you wanted the first time through, or is there still some issues that you're still trying to fight for?
No, it didn't get all the things to start with. And we had to go back and ask for it again the next year. It got a couple things, but we had to take a couple things out the first time, and we went back and requested that after the bill was passed, that they amend it to put those things in or to put, and so you may have to pick the most important things to start with and then go back and have them amend it to put other things in later because there may be issues that they're not comfortable putting in right off the bat because maybe there's not the right people involved or they don't think that there's the right people involved. So you may have to go back and find the right people or talk to more people about what they say about the things that are in it and how to get it to go through. Because sometimes it's just if they don't know enough information or don't have enough information, then they won't let it go.
Actually, that was something that I covered earlier on here, Darla, was about having all the information you need. If a legislator doesn't know what a bill is or doesn't know very much about it, then you could educate him on that bill, and then he could potentially become a future ally to help you get that bill passed in the future by taking it to the Senate.
Yeah, but you also don't want to give them the wrong information. If you don't know the information, then you need to say, let me get back to you with the correct information, or let me get somebody that can help me give you the correct information for this, because if you give them the wrong information, they may not come back to you to say, hey, I need help, because they may not give you a second chance.
Okay, perfect. Now, is there anything else that you want to add before we let you go?
No.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Darla, for speaking with us today.
All right.
I appreciate you taking the time, and you have a good day.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you so much, Darla, for speaking with us today, and hope your story gives other self-advocates encouragement to continue to speak up for themselves on the issues that are important to them. Again, if you know a self-advocate that is using their self-advocacy skills in a positive light to benefit themselves or others, as well as their community, and wants to be featured on a future episode of Legislative Matters Now with M&M, please reach out and let us know. You could also reach out to us if you have a piece of legislature you'd like us to cover on next month's show. Again, we'll give you the email addresses and the phone numbers. And again, the ARC's number is 304-422-3151. My email is morgan.spicer@thearcmov.org. And Melissa's is melissa.southall@peoplefirstwv.org. And we would love to have you on a future show. But with that, we're out of time for this month's show. I want to thank our guest, Ann McDaniel from the West Virginia Statewide Independent Living Council, who spoke with us about important legislation, and Darla Ervin, who was our advocate in action and spoke about how important self-advocacy is to her, for taking the time to be with us today. So thank you so much for joining us. And remember, advocacy matters, and so do you. See you next time.